We are officially into autumn now. Exciting. I have no idea where 2025 has gone. It has just flown by, and suddenly we're here and it's nearly October, and that means my plant care is going to need to change a little bit, and yours will too. And so I thought I would chat today about sort of my autumn to-dos, things that I change up in my plant care come autumn time, once like the days are getting shorter, the temperatures are dropping, but it's weird because I still want to drink my iced coffee all the time. Before we get into that though, I want to say if you're new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanty content all over the internet. So if you want to follow along with my houseplanty journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos, and subscribe to my channel. If you are not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate you returning. Also, before we begin, I want to say a huge thank you to today's video sponsor, Plants with Willow, who I will talk about a little bit more later on in the video. What I'm going to be doing here today while I chat about this stuff is dusting my plants, which is actually kind of a really important fall thing to do, and I can talk about that a little bit more in a sec, but I am terrible at dusting my plants. It's just like, I don't like dusting my house in general, so like dusting my plants, it's hard for me to get into. But I know my plants need it, and so I've gathered some up behind me that I'm going to be dusting, and we can dust them together while I talk about these things. But why dusting is so important is due to light. Because at this time of year, there is less and less hours of sunlight out, you want to be making sure that your plants are still able to photosynthesize as much as you possibly can get them to if you want them to keep growing. I should say, none of this is like a must do, but these are some things I think about and try to do during this time of year in order to ideally maintain the growth of my collection, because I want my plants to continue growing during this time. I'd prefer if they didn't go dormant over the winter, and I do my best to make sure that doesn't happen. And so dusting your plants is a really great way to make sure that they can continue to photosynthesize as much as possible during this time when they're not getting as many hours of daylight. And so I try at the very, very, very least, maybe I'll move that. I try at the very, very, very least to dust my plants in the spring and autumn, like sort of season changeover, because I want to make sure that they are getting as much light as possible. I have these really handy dusting gloves, which I absolutely love. They make it so much easier to get in and dust because I can just do it with my hands, kind of like I'm just feeling the leaf instead of getting a rag and all that stuff. And I suppose I could wet these. Maybe I should, but I'm just gonna dry dust these things because that just feels easier for right now. That being said, you can also just chuck them in the shower. I do that with a lot of my bigger plants or plants with like tons and tons and tons of leaves. It's a lot easier to throw a whole bunch of plants in the shower and shower them off than to go through and dust every single leaf. There's a couple other ways to sort of maximize the light your plants are getting in your collections. You can move plants closer to windows and stuff. It's a bit odd because I found actually during this time the sun is lower in the sky, and so I end up getting more like light coming into my home because it's not on top of the flat. Like if this is my window, the sun's not up here, so the light's not getting in, it's over here, so the light can come in and actually get like into my home a little bit more. So while there's less hours, I get more light coming in, if that makes sense. So you can always move plants closer to windows or even into the windowsills in order to make sure they're getting more light. The one thing to make absolute certain sure though is you're not letting your plants touch the windows, because during this time the windows can be quite cold and it can cause your plants to have cold damage if they like touch the window panes for a long time. Also, at least in this country, a lot of windows have radiators underneath them, and so you do need to be aware if you are putting your plants like that, then they will dry out a lot faster than you might think, and you need to like pay attention to that a little bit more, like now that your heating is on, if your plants are in the window sills. That one was like really fast. Okay. I'm also a massive fan of grow lights. I use grow lights all year round within my collection, but especially during the autumn and winter months, they're on a whole heck of a lot more. I have mine personally set to go on in some of the areas of my home all day, like my cabinets, areas of my home that aren't getting much light inherently. Those those things go on all day, but bits of my home that can get light without grow lights, I tend to only put the grow lights on like about around sunset. So they're only coming on for a few hours in the evening. I mean, can be quite a few hours in the evening when the sun sets at like 4. And then they all turn off at 10 p.m. So it can be quite a few hours. I have them all on smart power strips, which is like a huge thing that I absolutely love having in my home. Smart power strips are the freaking best because it makes it so much easier to like let my lights turn on automatically. I would not remember if I had to turn all my grow lights on myself. I wouldn't. There are so many grow lights out there as well, ranging in price from like pretty cheap and cheerful to expensive and also cheerful. But I've done like a big deep dive video where I talk about every single grow light I use in my collection. I think it's a couple years old now, so I do have more since, but I will link that video down below where I talk about like light output and the sort of light that things produce and the like color of it, tone of it, and whether or not like how far away I keep plants from it, etc. I will link that down below, as well as anything I talk about, sort of like the gloves or stuff. I'll link them to make sure that they are available to all of you in the description. But I really love grow lights, and I have so many more on this time of year than normal, especially if the days are cloudy. I tend to just manually put some on because it's like, it just feels dark in my home. I don't like using the overhead big lights. I'd much rather pop on a grow light, which is actually useful to my plants. Like, it just makes way more sense to do that than put on the big light. Oh my gosh, also this plant has gotten so big. Do you see the leaf like size up in there? This is the best it's grown in so long. Love semi-hydro. Ficus elastica, freaking love semi-hydro. The other massive change that you're probably going to need to make is with watering your houseplants. You're probably going to need to water them a whole heck of a lot less during this time because the temperatures are cooler, so they're not drying out as fast. Like, the water's not evaporating off the soil as fast. Also, your plants are probably slowing down in their growth, and so they're probably not using up water as quickly. And so you're probably gonna need to decrease the amount of water. And actually, a tool that I use to help me do that is Willow, the sponsor of today's video. So like I said, I use these smart plant sensors to help me adjust my watering during these changes of the seasons. So I have these little sensors in some of my plants, and they have this moisture meter that's sitting in your plant all of the time, constantly taking measurements of how much moisture there is in your plant's soil. And then it uses that data to tell you when your soil is dry enough for your plant to water again, which is going to be a lot less often this time of year when things are slowing down a little bit. And so it kind of takes the guesswork out of me figuring out when exactly I need to water. I can just rely on the notifications from this device to tell me that my plants are thirsty again. And another really cool thing about these sensors is they can help you with light, which is perfect, especially during this changing of the seasons. So they have this little window on here that when you stick this into your plant, you face it towards the light source for your plant. And it takes light level readings as well and can send you notifications if your plant is in too dark of a spot. So this time of year when your plants aren't getting as much light, this might send you a notification saying just that. And that can help you figure out whether or not you want to put more grow lights in a space or move the plant altogether. So I find these Willow sensors immensely useful during the change of seasons, and I really appreciate them sponsoring this video. Getting back to the dusting. Oh, I don't even remember where I stopped dusting this one. I guess I can just dust it all again, that's fine. The next topic I want to talk about is fertilizing. So I personally fertilize my plants all year round. I know some people recommend like stopping fertilizing during the autumn and winter months. And yes, you should stop fertilizing if your plants stop growing. But because I and probably you have created such an artificial environment for my plants with grow lights and heaters and all of that like fun techie planty stuff, they're probably going to continue growing during this time. And if your plants are continuing to grow, then they can continue to be fertilized. And so I just keep going. And I only stop if I notice my plants like really slowing down or stopping in growth. But to be honest, I don't tend to see that too much in my collection. So I just continue on, and I think you should too. If your plants are continuing to put out new growth, why not? Another thing that changes during these times of years is pests. So I've personally found in my years of growing houseplants that I tend not to have as many thrips outbreaks during the winter months because my windows are now closed. Most of the time, they can't really get in from the outside as easily. But I do notice more things like fungus gnats in my collection because my plants are staying typically moister for longer, and so they like that sort of like moist soil environment to live in. And I also notice more spider mites in my collection because the central heating is on, the air dries out a little bit more, it's just less humid, and spider mites really love a quite dry environment to sort of pop up in. And fun fact, I mean really scary fact, spider mites can lay dormant on your plants for like up to a year. Ridiculous, like not good at all. And so they could be lying dormant all summer until like the perfect conditions come along and it's finally winter and they've got a dry enough space to like actually grow and reproduce. Crazy, I know. And so it's important to keep an eye out for signs of spider mites and pests in general. You should always be keeping an eye out on your plants and making sure that they are doing okay. But I feel like you need to pay attention to different things at different times of year. And for me, winter is spider mite season, whereas thrips tends to be more of a summer pest. When it comes to fungus gnats, oh my gosh, they are so annoying. I have really started to notice them popping out a lot more lately. This tends to happen to me like every 6 months or so, but a lot more so in autumn than in spring. But how I deal with them is with beneficial nematodes. I have a whole video on that as well, and I actually have some nematodes in my fridge at the minute. I just need to like sit down and stand up actually and water all my plants with them. So I will be doing that soon in a future video. But basically they are little tiny microscopic worm things that eat the fungus gnat eggs and larvae, and essentially like kind of stop the population in their tracks, which really helps with controlling them. Luckily, fungus gnats aren't really they're not really a detriment to the plant. They're not going to kill your plant unless you have a huge issue with them and they can start eating up the roots of your plant. That's very, very unlikely though, unless you have like an insane problem. It's more likely that they're just annoying to you. I find that they fly in my face all the time, and I know that Cosmo likes to chase them, which maybe I'm not gonna keep them for my cat. I have plenty of other things that I can entertain my cat with. But I find that they just like fly up in my face and get in my nose or get in my tea, and I don't want that. And so using things like beneficial nematodes can be really useful to sort of stop that population. You do have to do that in addition to sticky traps, because the nematodes don't kill the adult population. They live in the like damp soil. So I use a combination of the nematodes and sticky traps to really get the problem done. And I pretty much only need to do that twice a year. Like I said, I tend to do it in the autumn and the spring, and that has been perfectly fine for me in my collection. I don't think I can ever really get rid of all of them because my collection is so big. I kind of think it's unreasonable to have absolutely zero pests, including fungus gnats, because like there's bound to be something somewhere. Like fungus gnats, I swear they can lay like 300 or something eggs each. Insane. And so you really need to get on top of it quick if you want to get rid of the population. So I do everything I can, and the main thing I do is use beneficial nematodes. And then the last sort of main thing I want to talk about is temperature and humidity. So obviously it's getting colder. It's getting colder, the winter is coming, and like your plants don't necessarily like it to be too cold. Personally, I don't find temperature to be too much of an issue in my home because we have central heating. We have the heat on for myself, but more so the cats. Before we had cats, Joe didn't let me put the heat on too much. Now that we have cats, Joe's like, it needs to be warm for the cats. And I'm like, not for me. He's like, no, the cats. So because we have central heating and that on much more often, typically, if you're comfortable in your home, your plants are comfortable, we tend to not let it get below like ideally 18, 19 degrees, because anything colder than that, we get cold, the cats are cold, and selfishly, the plants get cold. And so it tends to be warm enough in our home for the plants most of the time. But that being said, there are always some cooler areas in your home, and you can get things like heat mats in order to help things like water propagations or plants in semi-hydro not get as cold. Like things that have water, I feel like end up getting colder than sort of soil or propagation-y things. I personally haven't used heat mats. I do have a couple, and maybe this winter will be the year that I actually give them a go. Should I try them? Maybe. I got them secondhand, and I just I've always been too scared to use them because they don't have a temperature gauge on them. Something that I have heard recommended is that if you are using a heat mat, make sure you get a temperature gauge so you can tell how hot it is, because you can end up making it too hot for your plants, and not necessarily burning the roots, but it's getting a little bit too steamy in there, if you know what I mean. You're kind of cooking them. Also, if you are cranking the temperature up in your home, it's probably going to be lowering the humidity, because central heating brings the humidity down. So you can do things like get a humidifier or set out warm water cups or something in order to increase the humidity in your home. I personally tend to not do that very much. Our home is fairly humid as it is, even with the heaters on. If we dry laundry or something, because we don't have a tumble dryer, there's just wet clothes out. So normally I actually have a dehumidifier on, because it just gets so humid in our home in the winter, and we're trying to prevent mold. So like I said, it's not a problem for me in my home, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on things. I suggest getting things like little temperature and humidity sensors. I have them throughout my house, and you can get ones as well that hook up to your phone and will send you notifications if the temperature and humidity gets too low. But for the most part, I just have the ones with the little screens that tell me there and then what the temperature and the humidity is. And I just make sure manually that it doesn't get too low, which for me in our home hasn't really been the case. So there we go. That was fun. Those are all of the things that I think about as we go into these colder months, and how I make my collection not actually go dormant during this time. There's no need for your plants to slow down or stop growing over the winter and autumn months. Doesn't need to happen, and these are all of the things I do to prevent that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things you'd like me to talk about in the future, and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to keep growing. Bye!